Welcome to part 2 of our Sense of Place DC program. Today we're going to change things up a little bit. We learned all about the town in our last segment, but now we're going to focus more on archaeology and what goes on here. And we're going to be focusing more on the field in this segment, what an archaeologist does whenever they're working on an excavation. Before we head into the excavation site, I do have to ask you one question, and that's, do you know what an archaeologist does? An archaeologist looks at the past. They're looking at human culture and the materials that they left behind, the artifacts, evidence that's going to be under the ground that helps us better understand what daily life was like for people in the past. Whenever you have a question about what happened in the past, maybe you're working on a history paper, where do you go to find information about what happened? Do you maybe go see what's on the internet? Do you look in an encyclopedia? Look at books, go to the library, a museum perhaps? Do you ask your parents questions or even your grandparents about what was happening in the past? All of these are great places to find out about what was happening. They have good information. Here, I always look at books, I'll look at journals, I'll look at maps like our 1742 map. I'll look at newspaper articles about what people were buying and selling to help understand what life was like here. But it's really just what's happening at that moment in time. Just like that 1742 map, it's a great resource, but it doesn't show us the fort, it doesn't show us all of the church, because all of those are built after 1742. And that's an important thing to remember when learning about the past. It just gives you a moment in time capture. Think about, maybe you keep a journal or a diary about what it is you do every day. If I think about mine, perhaps it's your birthday and you're going to write about that. I might write about how the duck that's nesting near my door laid 22 eggs and how is she possibly going to sit on those 22 eggs. But I'm not going to write about what I ate for lunch today, because honestly I'm going to eat about the same thing every day. I don't find it very interesting. And that's going to be the same thing with historic documents as well. They're going to write about those momentous things that happened, those big events in their lives. Not necessarily the everyday stuff that happened, the things that help us better understand what's going on. So instead of looking at my journal or in your diary, what if I looked in your trash can? What if I looked at your trash over the week? If you looked in my trash, let's see, you'd see what I've been eating all week. You would see what projects I had decided to tackle on my days off. You would see what projects did not work out. You would probably find out whether or not my dog was well behaved while I was at work. You would learn a lot of information about me, and if I looked in your trash, I would learn a lot of information about you. Because that's all stuff we don't think about when we're throwing it away. And that's a lot what archaeology does here. It gives us a glimpse into the past, at the stuff people left behind, but that they didn't mean to leave behind. And so before we get started, I've got one really big question for you, and that's, what is archaeology? Well, we've already given you some clues here. It's going to be the study of the past, the people of the past, human culture, and what it is they found important, how it is they lived their everyday lives. That's what archaeologists are looking for, is that information about people and culture of the past. And the excavation that we're going to explore here is going to help us better understand what the lives were like for the people here in the town of Dorchester in the 1700s. You might be wondering how an archaeologist knows where it is they should be digging. And it takes a lot of research. A lot of stuff goes into archaeology before an excavation is ever going to be started. And it's looking at those historic documents. Here at Colonial Dorchester, we're really fortunate because we know that the park preserves an entire town, and we have that great map from 1742. So what archaeologists did was they took that map from 1742 and they overlaid it on an aerial map of the park today. And they basically put an imaginary grid over the entire park. And every 20 meters, the archaeologists would dig a small test hole to see if any artifacts were there. And the test holes here are 50 centimeters. So a test hole is going to be this wide and this long, so nice square. They're going to dig down into the ground, and they're going to dig down until they they stop finding artifacts, basically. And depending on if they find lots of artifacts or no artifacts at all, they're going to mark that down as whether or not they think that this is worth investigating in the future. And that's how we decided to start excavating where we're at on lot 52. They dug a shovel test there in their 20-meter grid, and they came down upon some artifacts and a floor, and they kept going deeper, and they found another floor. And the archaeologists wanted to know more about what was going on in this structure here in the town of Dorchester. Let's go over to the excavation site now, and we'll start to explore a little bit deeper about what archaeologists have found. But first off, we're going to take a look at some of the tools archaeologists use whenever they're excavating. There are many tools that archaeologists will use in the field as they begin their excavation. Probably the tool you're most familiar with is going to be the shovel. And the shovel is going to be good for getting through the grass layer we have here on the surface. But once you get through the first few centimeters of dirt, you're going to want to use a few different tools in your excavation. So the tools I use most often is going to be this tool here. This is a trowel, and you'll notice it's a little bit different shape than a shovel. It's flat. It's got these real long sides that come to a point. And so I'm going to use the shovel, or I'm going to use the trowel to remove the layers of dirt very carefully. And I'll show you that a little bit later. But whenever I'm using the trowel, I like to keep it nice and flat. I don't go into an excavation site and dig like I dig in my garden. Instead, I'm going to be very careful, slowly removing those layers of soil with the trowel. The other tool that I'm going to have is going to be my scoop and a broom, because once I loosen up that dirt, I'm going to need the broom and the scoop to sweep everything up and pour it into my bucket. I've got a knee pad just because sometimes the ground's a little bit hard. I always have a ruler with me because archaeologists want to know exactly how deep into the ground they're going to be excavating. So I'm constantly checking the depth and how far it is I've dug. And then because we're digging in the ground, we're going to encounter roots. So I always have a pair of root cutters as well to trim any of those little tiny tree roots I might uncover. Bigger roots, we probably need a bigger cutter than these guys here. In addition to the excavation tools that archaeologists use, they're also going to have some forms that help them remember what it is they've been excavating. So whenever I start a new excavation unit, I'm always going to have a bag that's clearly labeled with where I'm digging, the exact location, the GPS location, how deep I'm digging, and the day that I'm doing that excavation. And then the provenience number will come later on once we finish excavating and we go into the lab to look at the artifacts. The other things that I have, I'm always taking very detailed notes. Archaeology is very meticulous and methodical, and it's very important that you make sure that you're writing down all the details. As you remove those layers of dirt, you want to make sure you have those detailed notes because you can't go back and look at that dirt you've already moved. Archaeology is a destructive science. So it's important that you're always taking your notebook and writing down what it is you're finding during the day. Anything unusual or unique you found, maybe who is helping you out. And then as I dig down, I'm going to dig so many centimeters at a time. And so each set of centimeters is going to be a level. So each level I excavate is going to have its own form that I'm going to be filling out on where I'm located, how deep I dug, maybe what I found, what color was the soil. Those sorts of details are all going to go on each of my level forms. So there's lots of note taking in archaeology. Lots of people, when they think about archaeology, they think about the artifacts, the objects left behind by people of the past, things that they made or modified for their use. But there's a lot more under the ground that archaeologists are looking for than just the artifacts themselves. Here we've got the profile of a unit, and you can see the layers of the soil. How we start off with a light brown, we go into some reddish clay, then we have a darker brown layer. This is a layer of brick, and then we go back down to another brown layer before we hit this brick floor. And these layers of the soil I always refer to as stratigraphy. You might think of other places where you've seen layers of the soil. Maybe you've seen pictures of the Grand Canyon. where you can see that layering over time. And that's exactly what happened here. Because this site has not been disturbed, as the leaves come down and the dirt builds up, those layers of soil are going to build up, covering the homes of the people of the past. And so these layers of soil are things that archaeologists are going to be looking at to understand the activities that were going on here. And they're going to be documenting the different colors of the soil as well. So I've got my clipboard for all of my notes, and I also like to carry around a soil color book as well. And it's got colors of soils from all over the world. And so archaeologists will use these books to help match up exactly which shade of brown it is they're finding in their detailed notes. So when they go back to study the excavation later, they know exactly what color that soil is. It doesn't matter if their photo turned out a little bit different and the color was a little bit off. They've got that documented from the soil book in their notes that they're taking to better understand what was going on in this site. So we're down in one of the excavation units here on lot 52. This unit's been worked on for quite a while. We're about 40 centimeters down, so we're quite deep into the cultural layers. And I wanted to talk to you about something archaeologists call a feature. And a feature it's an immovable artifact. It sounds real fancy, but it's just something that you can't take out of the ground back with you to the lab to study. So I've got this brick wall here, and this brick wall would be a feature. But I think if I pull back these layers of soil, we'll start to see changes in the color of the soil, which are also going to indicate a feature. So, I have my trowel, and I'm using the edge of it to slowly remove those layers of soil, to pull them out of the way. I'm not digging real quick like I might in my garden. I'm just slowly taking back those layers of soil. Bring our dirt over here, and get our other trusty tools, our scoop and our broom. We're just going to sweep that dirt up to get it out of our way so we can get a better look. Pop that in our bucket to be sifted later. So if you look at the soil and the features here, you can see this is very light brown soil. This is pretty dark soil. There's a few other colors in there, but it's very dark brown. And over here, it's going to have some red. So I've got light brown soil here, and then I've got my dark brown soil here, and then I've got some red showing up right in this section here. And so being familiar with the excavation and what's going on here, I can tell you that with this brick wall, the light brown soil, this is going to be the builder's trench. It's going to be the hole that was excavated or dug down by the builders of the brick wall. This dark brown soil here actually shows me more recent activity. This is going to be from some folks in the 1800s who are helping themselves to the bricks in this abandoned town. So they're going to be robbing those bricks out of the ground. And then this red clay here that I have is actually the edge of the building that I'm kneeling in. So we're right on the edge of that building, and this is undisturbed soil from the construction of the building. But these features are very important in helping us understand what was going on here in this excavation site, creating a more complete picture about what was going on, what people's lives were like, what they found to be important. So it's more than just the artifacts with archaeology, it's everything around it, the context that they're found in, that's going to create that more complete picture and give us a better understanding about what life was like here in the 1700s. Once I filled up a bucket from the dirt in the excavation unit, I'll bring that bucket over and pour the dirt into this screen. Sifting through the dirt is going to be one of the steps in the process of archaeology, and depending on how deep we are and what it is that we're looking for, the level of detail, we'll use different types of screen. This mesh here is about a 1/4 inch, so it's some bigger screen, and if I'm looking for really fine stuff like fish scales or lead shot, I might use something finer like the screen you have in the windows of your home. So I'm going to sift this dirt out. got my trowel because I'm going to use the trowel to break up those clods of dirt. You always want to be careful because sometimes there's going to be sharp objects like glass in there. We'll get all that dirt through. Pick out some of the leaves and the roots that came out. I think I got a worm as well. We can start to see some of the artifacts that are going to be captured that you might not have noticed. Sometimes the artifacts are very small. You might not notice them as they're coming out of the ground, but as you sift out the dirt, you've got pieces of pottery is mostly what this one seems to have. I've got a tiny piece of brick. There wasn't a lot of brick in there. These are going to be pieces of brick. A nail, which is going to be good. And then it looks like here I've got, that's a piece of slate, which is a stone, but this is a piece of glass. So the building that we're excavating would have been completely finished with windows, plaster walls, a very nice looking kitchen building. So we find lots of the architectural elements of that structure as we're excavating down. But the screen helps us catch those artifacts. I'll take these back to the lab and do the next step in the process of archaeology. We've covered the process of archaeology in the field. You know what it is archaeologists look for when they're going to start an excavation, using those primary resource documents and shovel tests to determine a location that might need to be excavated. We know the tools they use, like the trowels and the scoop and the broom, to dig down through the layers of soil. You know how careful the archaeologists are going to be with their notes, detailing exactly what it is they're finding, how deep they're digging, and even the colors of the soil that they're encountering, so that they can interpret all of those features they found. Well, I've got the movable artifacts that I'm going to take back in our bag back to the lab so I can learn a little bit more about what it is we found in this unit here in our excavation. In this part, we covered what archaeologists do in the field, and I welcome you to view part 3 as well. We're going to head to the lab, clean up our artifacts, show you what archaeologists do there, and then we're going to do some artifact analysis to find out what all these artifacts that we're digging out of the ground can tell us about life in the 1700s.